When the apocalypse hit, I was getting ready to go home for New Year. The city I was in was suddenly hit by heavy snow, and the temperature plunged to minus 30 degrees Celsius. I had been relieved that I managed to get a ticket home, but I had no idea that the 29th day of the lunar year was when humanity's train into the bitter cold would depart. The 8th of February, 2024, 4 p.m. I was packed in at the train station entrance, unable to move. On the day I was supposed to go home, the whole city was suddenly hit by heavy snow. The sky was dark and overcast. I had brought my luggage to the train station early. My plan was to get there early and grab a seat in the waiting hall. But before ticket checks even started, I got stuck at the entrance. The snow was still falling, and it was only getting heavier. At first, I was standing at the very end of the line. Within minutes, countless people had lined up on both sides and behind me. I ended up closer to the middle instead. There were way too many people traveling for the spring festival. The lines gradually formed into a square wall of people, with no visible beginning or end. No one realized danger was closing in. It was brutally cold. Even my toes had gone numb. Complaints started coming from the line ahead. I heard all the trains at the station are delayed today. Yeah, my wife just showed me all the trains to Shenyang were canceled. Only this one is left. That still doesn't mean they can leave us freezing out here. It is as cold as the dead of winter. After hearing that, I took my phone out of my pocket and searched for tickets. Sure enough, ticket sales for my train home had also been suspended. I put my phone, which was draining like crazy, back into my down jacket pocket and held it there to warm it up. I didn't want to miss the last train home, so I had no choice but to keep waiting in line. At first, my mind could still wander as I wondered how long the train would be delayed. Later, it got so cold that my face went numb and my mind turned foggy. Every time I blinked, it felt like the freezing wind was forcing tears from my eyes. With every breath, the biting wind felt like charging blades. They seemed to stab back and forth through my throat. Even with my hands tucked inside my downcoat, the cold still mercilessly gnawed away at the last bit of warmth. In the end, I simply gave up. I gripped my rolling suitcase. I buried the lower half of my face in my scarf. Then I put my hands back in my pockets, lowered my head, closed my eyes, and stood there like a post. At one point, I felt like I had fallen asleep standing up. I don't know how long it had been when the crowd shoved me 2 steps forward. I forced my heavy eyelids open. My brain seemed frostbitten by the sudden drop in temperature too. For a moment, I couldn't think. There must have been some kind of commotion in the line. I could feel the movement around me getting bigger and louder, slowly turning chaotic. I tried to stand on tiptoe and scan my surroundings. Before I could react, the line behind me shoved forward and pushed me ahead. For a moment, I could barely keep my balance and swayed from side to side. The danger sense ingrained in me forced my brain to start working. Only then did I look around and realize something was wrong. I tried to shout at the top of my lungs, but I had been out in the cold for too long, and I could barely get the words out. Then I watched helplessly as the girl in front of me looked terrified and was shoved to the ground. I bit down on my tongue and finally found my voice. I shouted with my tongue still stiff. "You are stepping on someone," while shifting my body to the left. At that point, there were about 4 rows of people to my left and a wall of people to my right. I had planned to squeeze out from the left, but the pressure there only got worse. Some people forced their way forward with furious looks in their eyes. Others anxiously tried to squeeze through gaps in the line. Everyone's panic erupted all at once, and every hair on my body stood on end. I pulled myself together, hugged my suitcase to my chest, and slammed toward the left. I managed to fight my way out of the line first. Those who reacted more slowly weren't so lucky. Some lost their footing, and others fell to the ground. Behind me, the crowd surged forward with crushing force. I didn't dare look back. I turned and ran toward the footbridge outside the station. The cold air burned my throat and made me cough until I teared up. My body still hadn't fully recovered after COVID, and after only a few steps, I felt my heart pounding hard. The suitcase in my hand kept banging around, and the impact made my whole arm go numb. Police whistles, crying and shouting, and the roar of arriving trains slammed against my eardrums. I reached the bridge faster than I ever had in my life. Gasping for breath, I glanced back. For about 30 seconds, my mind went completely blank. On the way down from the bridge, it finally hit me that I might end up on the news. It was bitterly cold, and the freezing air kept forcing its way into my clothes. My whole body was so cold, it started to itch. There were 200 people waiting for taxis, and everyone's phone battery had been drained by the cold to about 15%. I selected every ride option in one go. More and more people were fleeing the train station. Afraid another stampede might happen, I didn't dare go anywhere crowded. At that point, I would rather freeze outside than squeeze into the nearby shops with everyone else. Nearby, some parents with a child were talking to the people sheltering from the cold inside a bank. Their child was probably still little, so they were hoping to pay a few hundred yuan to get someone inside to give up a spot. The child seemed to be doing okay. They were playing behind the adults, tossing hot water into the air to make it freeze. The hot water from the thermos traced a beautiful arc through the air. The longer I watched, the more my scalp tingled. My fingers opened Baidu on their own and tapped search. How cold does it have to be for hot water to freeze in midair? And my phone battery was down to 2%. I finally got a call from the driver of the 6-seat business van I had selected. After some back and forth, he arrived 5 minutes late. By then, the sky had gone completely dark. Maybe it was because I had just survived a close call. I felt a little tightness in my chest. After getting in the car, I plugged in my phone and opened WeChat. A bunch of messages popped up. At the top was the family group chat I had pinned. There was a screenshot from half an hour ago. Because of the heavy snow, all flights had been canceled. We all realized something was wrong. When I called them, my parents were near the biggest shopping mall back home. It was so noisy that even through the phone, I could tell the place was packed. I told them I wouldn't be coming home for New Year this year, then quickly ended the call. I knew we didn't have much time left. I gripped my phone, trying to piece all the information together. Extreme weather cold enough to freeze water in midair, flights canceled. I typed into the chat box, deleted it, then typed again. Finally, I said in a hoarse voice, "Sir, I'll pay you triple the fare. Let's go to the biggest outdoor gear store nearby first." There weren't many people in the outdoor gear store. Because of the spring festival holiday, only 2 employees were working. I pushed through the wind and snow to get inside. The people inside shivered from the cold air coming off me. Right away, I said I wanted to buy the sleeping bags in the store. The young sales associate was very friendly and started to give me a detailed rundown. I waved her off and asked directly for the warmest ones they had. Then I grabbed cold weather clothing in every size, from small to large. They were for layering later and for getting through power and gas outages. I also got a portable gas stove for boiling water and cooking, a fire axe for self-defense, and other supplies. I snapped a photo of the receipt and sent it to my family. Because I had bought so much. The young woman saw there weren't many customers and helped me carry everything to the car. Before leaving, I told her she should stock up on cold weather supplies too. She looked at the growing number of customers and didn't seem to take it seriously. I looked at the sky, now completely dark, stopped trying to convince her, and turned back to the car. Back in the car, I kept going through the basics: clothes, food, shelter, transportation, and daily supplies. I opened LME. I tried to stock up on food, but several large supermarkets all showed there weren't enough delivery drivers. Other stores also warned at checkout that their order slots were full. Given the situation, I wasn't going to waste any more energy on food. Because of the pandemic before, the supplies I had stocked up could last 3 months. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get by for a while. I left a message for my family. Then I directed the driver to a nearby pharmacy. I bought fever reducers like ibuprofen and acetaminophen, because with the recent 4th wave of COVID, everyone in my family had tested positive. But extreme weather can easily trigger all kinds of cardiovascular and respiratory problems. I had to go to the pharmacy and stock up on those kinds of medicines. Because today was the 29th day of the 12th lunar month, everyone got off work early. By the time I arrived, the pharmacy was about to close. I quickly bought 4 boxes of heat packs, a medical kit, and some basic medicine. After buying all that, the snow outside was blowing so hard I could barely see the road. The driver refused to change the route anymore. Seeing me stock up on so much stuff made him uneasy. He just wanted to finish this order, call it a day, and go home to get ready. After I got out that day, the driver helped me carry everything to the entrance of my building. At first, I was still on guard, wondering if he was trying to swipe my supplies. I didn't expect him to be genuinely helping me. My eyes stung with emotion, and I wanted to give him one of my winter suits. The driver looked at me and smiled. "Keep it for yourself. If something really happens, one suit from you wouldn't be enough for either of us." In the end, he waved at me, turned around, and left. When the time comes, just being with my family will be enough for me. The driver walked off into the wind and snow. His figure was swallowed by the darkness around him in an instant. I could only faintly see the headlights glowing in the distance. I barely looked for a moment before snowflakes started rushing into my eyes. I lowered my head and checked my phone. The last message was the medicine list I had sent to the family group chat half an hour ago. No one in the group had replied. I couldn't help letting my thoughts run wild. But after just 2 seconds, I sniffled through my frozen nose. Then I started dealing with the supplies piled up at the building entrance. Reality told me that no matter how I looked at it, I was the one in the worst situation. I had to stay alive first before I could reunite with them. When I got home, the warmth inside lifted my spirits. I touched the radiator. It was still hot. It wasn't the worst-case scenario yet. I quickly cooked myself a pack of instant noodles. I had just taken a few bites when a video call from my family popped up. The call popped up. On camera, they proudly showed me the supplies they had stocked up on today. Besides the items on my list, they had also bought quicklime, coal, solar generators, and other supplies. Turns out I was the clown here. Not wanting to be outdone, I showed them what I had bought. The worry on the other side of the screen was clearly lighter. Our family of 3, separated between 2 places, showed each other our supplies. It was our way of encouraging each other. We had to make it through this winter and meet again when spring came and the flowers bloomed. Before hanging up the video call, Mom and Dad told me. Temperature in Q City had already dropped to minus 43 degrees today. Just like B City. It had suddenly been hit by heavy snow and the temperature had plunged. Since I lived alone, I absolutely couldn't let my guard down. The lowest temperature ever recorded here was only minus 27 degrees. The heat was still on now. But that didn't mean the city's heating system could handle temperatures of minus 40 or 50 degrees later. I needed to prepare early while things were still manageable. After hanging up, I started organizing my supplies. First, I used the sealant from the outdoor gear store to seal every gap around the windows. Then, I spent some time figuring out the solar charging panels. I had never used them before, but luckily, the instructions were clear. It only took about an hour to install them. After that, I cleared off the bed, set up the tent on it, and kept it as close to the radiator as possible. The bed was 2 meters by 2 meters, but it was still a little small for the tent. So I used the boxes from the self-heating instant noodles I bought earlier to support the parts of the tent that hung over the edge. At least, it finally looked workable. I took one moisture-proof mat and one sleeping bag I had bought earlier and put them inside the tent. I placed the rest of the sleeping bags near the bed so I could reach them whenever I needed to. I kept one set of cold weather clothes in the tent and put the rest by the bed too. For now, I set the portable gas stove on the small table by the tent entrance. If it got colder later, I could move it inside. The gas canisters for the stove were important. They could only be stored at temperatures no lower than minus 20 Celsius. So I brought them all into the tent and stuffed them into the side pockets. Honestly, because I was short on time, I hadn't bought that much. It only took about 3 hours to organize everything around the tent. What really took time was sorting through the food and water at home. I turned the whole place upside down. Then I ranked everything by what should be used first in extreme cold. After counting everything, I had enough food and water to last me 3 months. As long as the authorities could handle it, they would start rebuilding after the disaster as soon as possible. It wouldn't drag on for too long. If they couldn't handle it, then it would be a disaster for all of humanity. Then it would only be a matter of dying sooner or later. 3 months was long enough. By the time I finished all that, it was already 4 in the morning on the 8th. So I decided to just stay up all night and grab the last round of supplies at 6. Outside, the wind howled terrifyingly, as if it was trying to destroy the world. Then a user with a Hainan IP posted a snowy scene. It was snowing in Hainan. Comments were all going on about how beautiful the snow was and saying they would go take photos there tomorrow. Only a few users were complaining that the damp cold at 0 degrees was unbearable. Maybe because I stayed on that video too long, the algorithm picked up on it. When I refreshed, my feed was full of videos about temperatures dropping all over the country. People in Guangdong were wrapped in thick cotton coats and roasting oranges around a stove. By then, water thrown into the air froze instantly. Users with Northeast IP addresses posted videos of people jumping off village rooftops and disappearing straight into thick snowdrifts. Everyone realized the weather was not right. Human beings are so small in the face of nature. Suddenly, I felt the extreme cold wasn't such a big deal. When all of humanity was facing extreme weather together, I wasn't as scared anymore. At 6 in the morning, I bought another batch of supplies in one go. After finishing the last item on my to-do list, I finally breathed a sigh of relief. I was ready to wash my face and go to sleep. I turned on the faucet. The first water that came out was still barely warm enough for me to brush my teeth. But by the time I went to wash my face, the water had gone completely cold after only a few moments. My fingers ached from the sting of the cold water. I could only wet a face towel first, let it sit for a bit, then wring it out and quickly wipe my face. When I got back to the bedroom, I touched the radiator. It wasn't as hot as it had been last night. I crawled into the tent, and as soon as I lay down, my eyelids felt incredibly heavy. My dreams were a total jumble. When I woke up again, it was because I was freezing. I raised my hand and touched the tip of my nose. It was a little cold. How cold was it now? I checked my phone. It was already 4 in the afternoon. Here in Haidian district, the temperature was minus 39 degrees. Everyone in the WeChat groups was talking about the global temperature drop. Apparently, after tonight's news broadcast, there would be a special interview program. Besides CCTV's well-known hosts, the program would also feature experts from fields like outdoor survival, research, and weather. So far, more than 200 million people had already reserved a spot to watch the live stream. People in the group were still deep in discussion, saying they couldn't buy supplies. I quickly went through several apps and made reservations on all of them. I also set alarms in case the apps got so jammed that I couldn't get in when the time came. Groceries I bought at 6 in the morning were still out for delivery, way past the expected time. That was pretty much what I expected. Hunger came over me in waves. I climbed out of my sleeping bag, wrapped myself in the down jacket inside the tent, and put on the thick red socks I had bought, especially for New Year's. Then I opened the tent and got ready to cook. The first thing to feel the cold was my face, exposed directly to the air. I shivered. I reached over and touched the radiator beside the tent. The radiator was only warm. The difference from when I got back last night was obvious. There were already signs that the heating wasn't strong enough. I looked out the window again. The sky was still overcast. Outside, the wind howled and battered the windows. There wasn't a single person on the street. All I could see was a blanket of white. The wind was getting stronger and stronger. I hunched my neck against the cold, pulled the curtains shut, and started making my first meal after waking up. For now, the heating, gas, and electricity were still holding up. I decided to use those for now and leave the emergency portable stove untouched. The kitchen wasn't as well insulated against the cold as the bedroom. I planned to move all my cooking into the bedroom later and use the electric pot from home. I had filled the pot with water earlier for storage, so it took me quite a while to transfer most of it into other containers. Then I carried the pot and a few packs of instant noodles back to the room. Once the water boiled, I added the soup packet first and brought it to a rolling boil over high heat. Then I added the noodle block and sprinkled the seasoning packet and vegetable packet on top. I covered the pot and let it simmer. After 2 minutes, I lifted the lid, flipped the noodle block over, and let it keep simmering. Since it was simmering over high heat, the noodles visibly turned golden and springy. When the noodles looked about done, I turned off the power and lifted the lid. To use less water. Unless I had to, I didn't plan to make more work for myself by washing pots and bowls. I used the pot as my bowl. I picked up a big mouthful of instant noodles with my chopsticks. I slurped them down, and the aroma of pork bone broth hit me right away. It exploded across my mouth in rich, rolling waves. After a few bites, I had polished off all the noodles. Then I lifted the pot and gulped down a big mouthful of hot soup. The chill inside me slowly faded away. By the time I finished the whole pot of soup, my entire body had warmed up. I thought that with the sudden drop in temperature, everyone would stay home for the next 2 days. Right after I rinsed out the pot, someone suddenly pounded hard on the security door. Who is it? Alarm bells went off in my head. My current place was a small one-bedroom apartment, so none of my friends had ever come over. Why would some stranger knock on my door in weather like this? I had read plenty of apocalypse zombie stories, so I knew how twisted people could get under extreme conditions. That was far more terrifying than the disaster itself. The sudden knocking made me even more uneasy than usual. I was planning to pretend no one was home. But when the person outside saw I wasn't opening the door, they knocked even harder, as if they were sure someone lived here. Worried the noise would draw more people and send things out of control, I grabbed the electric pot and a kitchen knife and went to the door. Who is it? I shouted in a harsh voice. The zombie or middle-aged man I had imagined did not appear. Instead, an auntie's voice came from outside. She said impatiently, "Young man, I've been knocking on your door forever, and you still wouldn't open up." I was just about to snap back even harder when her next sentence stopped me cold. The neighborhood committee is organizing snow removal. Volunteers who take part can get a bucket of soybean oil and a carton of eggs. Are you signing up or not? I froze in place. An hour later, fully bundled up, I joined the snow clearing team downstairs. There weren't many people left in our complex. Young people had already gone home for the new year before the temperature dropped. Most of the ones left were elderly people waiting for their grandchildren to come back this year. At first, clearing the snow really did help. We cleared away more than half the snow from the building entrance. But then the snow fell harder and harder until it was practically pouring down from the sky. Community staff handed out the supplies early and told us to hurry home. I had thought everyone was shoveling snow for the free eggs and soybean oil, but when the job was called off, a few stubborn old men still refused to leave no matter what. My ears were about to freeze off out there. All I wanted was to hurry home and drink some hot water. My wife and I are still waiting for our son and daughter-in-law to come back for New Year's Eve dinner. If you won't let me clear the snow, my children won't be able to find their way home. When I got home and took off my down jacket, several big clumps of snow fell onto the doormat by the door. With one hand, I filled the electric kettle and set it to boil. Then I turned on the electric blanket and crawled into the sleeping bag inside the tent. Once everything went quiet, the pain in my ear became even more obvious. I could feel it clearly. Pain went deep into my ear canal. It made my head and teeth hurt too. It was the kind of pain that really wore me down. By then, my body temperature was almost the same as the snow outside. I lay in the sleeping bag for a long while, until the boiled water outside had cooled down to warm, and only then did I finally warm up. When I opened my phone, the evening news was already halfway through. The experts' live stream was about to start soon. It was Lunar New Year's Eve. Normally, my family would make 8 or 10 dishes to celebrate the new year. Obviously, I didn't have that option now. After thinking it over, I took a bag of pan-fried dumplings from the fridge. For people from the north, it doesn't feel like New Year without dumplings. I gave them a quick fry. By the time I was done, the live stream was just starting. Sure enough, the live stream was unbelievably laggy. I tried opening it through all the major apps, but none of them would let me in. Sipping my brown sugar water, I finally gave up trying to fight hundreds of millions of people for the stream. I put on the Knockout, which I hadn't watched yet, as something to watch while I ate. After I finished the dumplings and washed the pan, the live stream had ended, just as expected. News about the extreme cold had taken over the trending lists on every app. Experts advise against drinking too much hot water each day. US media says this global deep freeze may be linked to the Russia-Ukraine war. Air raid shelters nationwide reopen starting today. Essential guide to staying warm at home. Extreme cold in Mohi. A certain celebrity suggests covering the earth with a dome. I casually tapped open the essential guide to staying warm at home. The guide was extremely detailed. It listed everything from ginger water and ways to fight off the cold to emergency medicine. It was very clear. I quickly saved it. This extreme cold had arrived so suddenly. Even with a cold weather survival guide, getting supplies was still another problem. Should I make a trip outside? My place actually wasn't far from a big supermarket. The supplies I had were enough to last 3 months. Was there really any need to go out? I opened my phone and checked. Temperature was already minus 39.8 degrees. It would probably drop to minus 40 tonight. If this were one of the novels I usually read, I should be taking a hot shower right now, holding a hot water bottle and quietly waiting for the apocalypse to arrive. But I wasn't in some rebirth wish fulfillment novel. I couldn't do that. I couldn't just sit inside doing nothing, waiting for someone else to save me. I didn't want to survive the apocalypse by being this passive. I had to live. I had to survive. I had to take action. After shoveling snow that afternoon, I reinforced my protection from head to toe this time. First was my head. I dug out the 3M N95 masks I'd bought before to protect my face. When the pandemic restrictions were fully lifted last year, the masks I bought back then came in handy now. Then I started layering winter clothes over my heated vest. After just 2 layers, I was already sweating indoors. Too many layers would make it hard to move, so I left it at that for now. I went back and forth over my knees for a long time, but still couldn't bring myself to stick heat patches on them. At minus 40, I figured a couple extra pairs of pants would be enough to tough it out for now. The most important thing was keeping my feet warm. When your feet are cold, your whole body gets cold. Finally, I stuffed a kitchen knife into the pocket of my thick down jacket. February 9th, 2024. Lunar New Year's Eve. At 9:30 p.m., I headed out. The blizzard that had started in the evening was even stronger than it had been that afternoon. Dust and snow were mixed together, hard as shards of glass. Only now did I understand what minus 40 really meant. I had been walking along the wall at first, but then I noticed a lot of huge chunks of ice on the rooftops. So I had to move to the middle of the road, where there wasn't much overhead cover. I pushed forward, letting the wind batter me. Once I left the residential complex, I realized more people were out than I had expected. On the road to the supermarket, a long line of red brake lights stretched as far as I could see. At first, I tried to figure out how many hundreds of meters the traffic jam stretched, but the more I looked, the more uneasy I felt. I prayed these people would hurry up and drive home, because the traffic was only going to get worse. If they didn't leave now, it would be too late. By the time I reached the supermarket, the ready-to-eat food on the shelves had already been cleared out. Thermal underwear and down jackets had even been stripped off the mannequins. They were completely bare. All of this was what I expected. This temperature drop affected too large an area. At first, a lot of people probably hadn't fully processed it yet. Once officials stepped in through a live stream and confirmed the global cooling, the whole nature of the situation changed. I grabbed some things other people didn't want, like small household fire extinguishers, petroleum jelly, faucets, and so on. Then I scraped together the last bit of food, tossed 200 yuan at the checkout, and got ready to go home. The way back was harder than the way there. The sky was full of murky gray-yellow clouds, somehow even brighter than it had been at dusk. Cold wind wailed in waves, tearing through the city and destroying everything in its path. I struggled like I was caught in raging waves. The N95 couldn't block the brutal cold wind at all. Every bit of exposed skin felt like it was being sliced over and over. The pain almost unbearable. The road was still a sea of red. Every now and then, an impatient horn would honk. By then, I was too numb to react and had no emotions left to show. I didn't know how long I'd been walking before I finally made it into the complex. The apartment buildings blocked some of the wind, so things were a little better inside. At least I could finally catch my breath. I picked up my pace and pushed against the wind for a few more minutes before finally getting home. As soon as I stepped inside, I was so exhausted that I sat right down on the floor and thought about what to eat for dinner. After eating instant noodles for 2 meals in a row, for the sake of my health, I decided to make steak tonight. I still had no strength at all, so I could only take the steak out of the freezer first, then crawl into my sleeping bag for a short nap. Who knew that quick nap would turn into a full 10 hours of sleep? When I turned on my phone, I saw it was already 9 in the morning on the 10th. The temperature report showed Haidian district had hit a record low, and it was now only minus 52 degrees. I got dressed and was about to cook when I casually touched the radiator. It was ice cold. The heating had stopped working. While the steak was frying over low heat, I reinforced the insulation inside the tent again. My phone signal kept cutting in and out, then died completely before the steak was done. I zoned out for a while. Being suddenly cut off from the world felt awful. Luckily, the power was still on. I just didn't know how long it would last. After finishing the steak, I crawled back into the tent and turned on the electric blanket. Just as I was getting drowsy after eating and drinking my fill, there was a knock at the door. I instantly went on alert and hurried to the door. I pressed my eye to the peephole and looked outside. A familiar figure was standing there. It was the auntie who had organized the snow clearing last time, standing at my door now. She was stamping her feet and blowing warm air into her hands. Seeing her like that, I quickly opened the door. This time, she didn't complain that I was slow to open the door. She just picked up the bag of rice by her feet and handed it to me. Only then did I notice all the supplies piled behind her. Warmth spread through my chest, but before I could thank her, she got straight to the reason she had come. Community office wants each building to choose a building captain, with party members given priority. There are no party members in our building. Only the woman in 302 downstairs, back when her child was in school, was named an outstanding parent every year. Being an outstanding parent shows she's a responsible person. From now on, everyone in Unit 2 of Building 55 should do our best to support her work. The building captain's duties are actually very simple. She needs to check the neighbors' temperatures and supplies every day. If any problems come up, bring them up right away so everyone can figure out a solution together. After the community worker finished explaining, she left. I kept passing the message along to the people upstairs. After I closed the door, I felt a faint unease. In the face of disaster, can we really stand up to the test of human nature? That same day, the resident in 302 stepped into her role. This building captain really lived up to her outstanding parent title. She was genuinely serious and responsible. In the freezing wind, she went door to door, knocking and asking everyone about their temperature. When she reached the 8th floor, I pricked up my ears and listened for movement outside. At first, no one answered at the first 2 apartments she knocked on. She kept knocking at the 3rd apartment until someone finally opened the door. I tried to remember how many people from the 8th floor had come out when we were clearing the snow. It had been so cold that I just wanted to get home as soon as possible. I vaguely remembered a young couple coming into the building behind me, but I honestly couldn't remember which floor they stopped on. While I was trying to remember, the sounds outside quietly died down without me noticing. By the time I snapped out of it, loud banging on the door was ringing in my ears. I flinched in fright. I quickly slipped back to the bedroom, and I pretended I had just heard it and called out, "Coming." When I opened the door, I saw a woman younger than I had expected. Her face was red from the cold. When she saw me open the door, she opened the notebook she was carrying. For my name, I casually made one up, Sanbao. She wrote it down carefully. Her gloved hand gripped the pen, and the tip trembled slightly. The writing came out crooked, and she even left out a dot at the end. After writing down my name, she took an electronic thermometer out of her down jacket pocket. She aimed it at my forehead. I stared at the minus 11.2 C reading, a little stunned. Without even changing expression, she put a check mark after my name. Then she closed the notebook and spoke again. "It's cold out. Try not to go outside unless you have to. If anything comes up, come find me downstairs in 302. I'll also need everyone in the building to support my work going forward." I agreed to each thing she said. She waved for me to close the door. I thanked her several more times before closing it. After I shut the door, I first pretended to go back to the bedroom. Then I turned around and quietly went back to the door. The building was completely silent. Feeling puzzled, I couldn't help leaning in to look through the peephole. A huge close-up of a face suddenly appeared right in front of me. I was so scared I nearly passed out. When I looked more closely, it was the building captain from earlier. She was still standing outside my door and hadn't left. My whole body went stiff, and I stood there for about a minute. Only then did she turn and knock on the neighbor's door. I briefly breathed a sigh of relief, but I knew I still had to stay on guard. Once she had greeted every resident in the building, I would have to add some security measures at my door. To be honest, I really didn't know who lived next door to us. I used to leave for work at 9 every morning and come back at 9 at night. I almost never ran into anyone. After the building captain left, I didn't go back to my room. I kept secretly watching her through the peephole. She knocked on 901 for quite a while, but the door to 903 across the hall opened instead. An elderly woman opened it. Her hair was gray, but she looked full of energy. I had a vague impression of this family. One morning at 6, the old woman's son and daughter-in-law had left. Her 3 or 4-year-old granddaughter couldn't bear to see her parents go and cried her heart out. At the time, I thought someone was stealing a child, so I opened my door a crack. I wanted to see what was going on. The old woman thought I was about to yell at her. She quickly explained and apologized. I was sleepy at the time, so when I saw nothing was wrong, I closed the door and went back to sleep. After that, I still had no idea how many people actually lived there. Now the old woman started telling the building captain about her family situation. That was when I found out she and her husband only had each other. Her son's family had gone to his wife's hometown for the new year. So right now, it was just the 2 of them living there. As usual, the building captain used that unreliable forehead thermometer to check the elderly couple's temperatures. Then she repeated the same spiel she had given me and turned to head upstairs. The tip of my nose was freezing, so I got up and went back to the tent in my bedroom to warm up. When I heard footsteps going downstairs, I crawled out of the tent, put on my gloves and started my plan. I called them safety measures, but I barely had any tools at home. The rope, cement, and wire they talk about in novels, because I was out of time, I hadn't bought any of them. All I could do was move the shoes from the entryway cabinet into the storage room. Then I took the kitchen knife, the fire extinguisher, and the chili powder I got from the supermarket and set them on top of the shoe cabinet. That way, if I needed them later, I could grab something to defend myself. Even after I finished organizing everything, I still felt uneasy. I was just an ordinary person. When something happened, I would still be scared. After thinking it over for a long time, I pushed the wardrobe from the bedroom into the living room. Only then did I feel a little more secure. Over the next few days, 302 knocked on my door right on schedule. Maybe because I made it so obvious and never opened the door all the way. Her strange behavior from before started to feel like a dream. Gradually, she could even chat with me a little. From her, I learned that because of the new year, there actually weren't many residents in the building. There were fewer than 10 people in total. Even she lived alone, with her children and family spending the holiday out of town. After she went back inside, I grabbed a pen and did some calculations. Aside from the building captain in 302, the resident on the 8th floor who had opened the door before, Mrs. Yulan in 903, and me in 902. There were at most 4 other people in the building. Based on 302's habit of knocking on 02 first, then 01, and 03 last, the 8th floor resident most likely lived in 803. The 2nd floor was already buried in snow, so no one could be living there. A few times 302 came by, she would head downstairs after reaching me. The situation upstairs was probably the same. There was also a couple in the building, which meant at least 2 of the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th floors were empty. After working it all out, I realized there were fewer people in the building than I had imagined. Still, I now had a rough idea of what was going on in the building. Before I could relax even a little, what had to happen finally happened. On the night of the 6th day of the new year, a day that should have been spent with family, our residential complex lost power. The moment the power went out, I could feel the temperature around me drop sharply. I moved all the supplies I had stocked up on over beside the tent. I curled up in my sleeping bag with heat packs stuck to me. But against real hunger and cold, the heat packs barely helped anymore. At night, I kept tucking my feet behind my knees to warm them, but it hardly helped at all. I was freezing until the sky started to brighten, and only then did I finally use the portable gas stove to heat water for warmth. The steam from the hot water rose sharply inside the room, all the way to the top of the tent. I couldn't bear to let the water go to waste, so I scooped out half a spoonful of millet the old lady from 903 had given me. Then, I poured it into the pot to cook. When I counted the gas canisters I had left, my heart sank. There were only about 20 left. Even if I pushed it to the limit and used only 3 a day, I could only last 1 more week. By daytime, the temperature gradually rose again, and I really was exhausted. I took advantage of the slight warmth to catch up on sleep and planned to think about supplies after I woke up. But not long after I fell asleep, someone started pounding hard on my door. The building rep was coming by, even on a freezing day like this. I stayed curled up in the tent, pulled my pillow over my ears, and kept sleeping. Honestly, in weather like this, people should just stay inside. At this temperature, even getting out of bed was hard, let alone standing in the drafty hallway. Knocking outside still wouldn't stop, and the noise was driving me crazy. But I couldn't help worrying that maybe she had run into some kind of trouble. After another minute of knocking, I put on 4 or 5 layers of down jackets and got out of bed. Through the peephole, I saw that the person knocking really was the building rep. The strange look on her face made me think back to the first time I met her. These past few days, 302 really had been looking out for me. But the fact that she kept standing outside my door had still planted a seed of suspicion in my mind. I picked up the kitchen knife by the door and held my breath. I wanted to see if she would leave if I never answered. Then, unexpectedly, a gust of cold wind blew through. The door to 903 slowly opened a crack. 903's door hadn't been shut. Alarm bells went off in my head. In weather like this, leaving the door open was basically a death sentence. I stared hard through the peephole. When I saw 302 bend down to close the door next door, every hair on my body stood on end. As she bent over, the sweater she was wearing underneath showed through. 903 gave me the millet. I had felt terribly embarrassed. So I went home, grabbed a few heat packs, and tucked them into her arms. The old lady beamed as she pushed them back, pointing to the bright red sweater she was wearing. She said her daughter-in-law had knitted it for her, and that it was especially warm. She tugged at the hem of the sweater with a hint of pride. She said her name was even embroidered on it. I looked at the flower, tilted my head, and tried to figure it out for a long time. Her name is Lily? The old lady's smile disappeared. She looked completely speechless. In the end, she couldn't resist showing off, and said it was a magnolia. Now, that magnolia sweater was on 302. Thinking of the elderly couple in 903, I couldn't hold back the tears welling in my eyes. I gritted my teeth, not daring to make even the slightest sound, and stared hard through the peephole. I saw 302 close the door, then hunch over and tiptoe back to my door. She slowly pressed her ear against my door. Knowing she was only a door away, my body started trembling uncontrollably. When 302 saw there really wasn't any sound coming from my place, she waited another minute. In the end, she couldn't take the cold anymore. She went downstairs first. Only after I heard the door downstairs close did my strength give out. I didn't dare make a sound, and I cried until finally, a thin layer of ice crystals formed on my face. Only then did I pull myself together and return to the tent. After crawling into the sleeping bag, reason told me I should hurry up and sleep to save my strength. But a minute later, I still sat up. I bundled up in layer after layer, putting on several pieces of thermal and cold weather clothing. Finally, with a down jacket draped over me, I opened my front door. This was the first time I had opened the security door since that supermarket run. Cold wind suddenly rushed into the apartment. I quickly carried the kitchen knife and shut the door behind me. A stone had been wedged in 903's security door. 302 probably hadn't finished searching the place yet, so the door hadn't been shut tight. I kicked the stone away and pushed open the neighbor's door. Inside was an extremely tidy apartment. The old woman's family photo hung on the wall. She and her husband were both lying face down on the kitchen tiles, the blood on the backs of their heads already frozen solid. I draped a sweater over them. At last, I had completed one of the reasons I came. I stood there in silence for a dozen seconds and paid them my final respects. I gave myself only 2 minutes to look for clues. The fact that both of them had fallen face down meant someone had attacked them while their backs were turned. That kind of attack from behind also suggested that 302 was very cautious. It could also mean she wasn't sure she could handle 2 elderly people fighting back at once. As for the motive for killing them, judging by the timing, 302 only started acting after the power went out. Before the outage, she had been living peacefully alongside us. It seemed like the blackout had pushed her over the edge, so she had to get a sense of security by stealing from others. But why 903? I had analyzed the residents on our floor before. The 9th floor was probably the most crowded floor in the whole building. Making a move on the 9th floor was riskier than doing it on any other floor. If the 3 of us fought back with everything we had, she could easily be the one who ended up dead. Unless she was lying, and there weren't actually that many residents in the building. Maybe there were only 3 households left in the entire building. At that thought, I once again felt every hair on my body stand on end. Without me realizing it, the wind behind me had grown weaker. I sensed something and whipped my head around. For some reason, 302 had come back and was now standing right behind me. I had no idea how long she had been watching me. I had never been this calm. In half a second, I sorted through everything I knew so far. She was short on supplies and had been driven to the brink by the outage. Her strength had to be running low now. If I look intimidating enough right now, I should be able to scare her off. Half a second later, I glared at her, raised the kitchen knife in my hand, and charged at her with a roar. It must have looked terrifying, because 302 really did seem scared. She stared at me, then her face suddenly changed, and she turned and ran downstairs. Still yelling, I rushed out of 903. My hands were shaking as I unlocked my door. Halfway down, 302 must have figured out what was going on. Her footsteps paused, then rushed back up even faster. I shoved the door open and ducked inside. Just as I was closing the door, I saw that her eyes were bloodshot. Her face twisted with rage as she charged toward the 9th floor, knife in hand. The way she looked, like she had nothing to lose, really scared me, and half my nerve vanished. There was no way I dared face her head on now, so I grabbed the chili powder from the shoe cabinet. I flung it into the hallway and slammed the door shut. A scream came from outside. Maybe 903 was watching over me, because I actually got it in her eyes. This was my chance. I raised the knife, ready to open the door. It felt like someone slapped the hand holding the knife, and it suddenly fell to the floor. It made a sharp clang. I froze. The knife had landed on my shoe and hadn't cut me. It still hurt pretty badly. Pain snapped me back to my senses, and only then did I remember why I'd picked up the knife in the first place. While I was stunned for that moment, 302 had already run off. I picked up the knife and set it on the shoe rack. Then I went back into the tent and took off my thick layers. Only then did I realize the thermal underwear underneath was soaked with sweat. Shivering, I changed into a fresh set of clothes. At last, I finally had a chance to lie down properly in my sleeping bag. Even after going so long without sleep, I wasn't tired at all. All I could think about was how to handle what came next. 302 probably wasn't going to let this go. Other than facing her head on, did I have any other options? The room was freezing, so I lit the portable gas stove again. The millet porridge from earlier had frozen into a solid lump, so I added some water and started heating it up. Watching the water in the pot slowly come to a boil, I started forming a plan. A day later, 302 still hadn't given up. Sure enough, she came to my door again. First, she knelt in front of my door and cried, saying she had it hard too. After 2 minutes of crying, ice slowly started forming on her cheeks. When she saw I wasn't responding at all, she pulled the knife from inside her coat. Then she started hacking at my door. She was weaker than I'd expected, but her movements were vicious. For a while, the whole hallway echoed with the loud bangs of her chopping at the door. When I saw the time was right, I shouted from behind the door, "Stop hacking at it. If the door breaks, we're both dead." 302 stopped hacking at the door. Seeing that, I went on, "What What exactly do you want? Can we just live in peace? She lowered her head and let out a strange laugh, her teeth grinding together. I want to live here with you. I refused without hesitation. Are you kidding? There's no way I'm letting you stay in my home. Her eyes shifted, and she spoke again. Get me a cup of hot water first. I'm thirsty. After I drink it, we can talk terms. I snapped from behind the door. Hot water? Now? Are you trying to make things hard for me? I've been licking ice every day just to keep from dying of thirst. And you're asking me for hot water? And forget working together. We might as well all die. With that, I started walking back inside. She quickly changed her tune. She asked for a few packs of instant noodles and some bottled water frozen solid. Only then did I reluctantly agree, though it hurt to part with them. How am I supposed to give them to you? I asked. How do I know you won't chop me up the second I open the door? Woman kept her head down, her expression unreadable. After half a minute, she finally spoke. Go between the 9th and 8th floors. Put the supplies down, then close your door. I struggled with it a while longer before agreeing against my better judgment. When I agreed, the woman outside the peephole trembled with excitement. I pretended to go back inside for the supplies. In reality, I poured the water that had already thawed into a basin. Then I walked toward the door. 302 had already backed away to the stairs. I took a deep breath and opened the door. The instant I opened it, the woman practically lunged at me. The kitchen knife stabbed straight toward me. I dumped all the water in the basin over her head and held the basin in front of me. Her knife punched through the bottom of the plastic basin and drove straight into my abdomen. Fighting through the pain, I kicked her down the stairs and quickly shut the door. Leaning against the security door, I gulped in several breaths. Only then did the involuntary trembling stop. 302's body should have started freezing over by now. Without warmth, the ice on her body would never melt. After taking a moment to recover, I removed the pillows tied around my abdomen and chest. The pillow underneath had already been stabbed open, cotton spilling out. As I took the pillow off, the knife clattered to the floor. I picked it up and placed it on the shoe rack. Then, I held my stomach and went back into the little tent. Although the pillows had blocked it, my abdomen was still bruised. I turned on the portable gas stove. Then I slowly closed my eyes, finally ending several days of non-stop stress. It had been far too long since I'd gotten a good night's sleep. The snow outside was still falling. I sank into a deep sleep and slept like the world had gone dark. I slept until a glimmer of light appeared before my eyes. I woke up. Light was so bright that I had no choice but to open my eyes. The first thing I saw was the top of my tent. I squinted. I took off my down jacket and crawled out of the sleeping bag. The bulb in my apartment, dim for so long, was shining as brightly as it could. I wiped the thin layer of sweat from my forehead, still a little dazed. The power was back. As the community staff led me downstairs, I happened to see the medics lifting 302 onto a stretcher. She was still alive. As I watched them carry her away, I wondered how she had ever been named an outstanding floor captain. The door to 302 was wide open. While no one was paying attention, I went inside. There was an unfamiliar family photo inside. The woman in the photo was not the 302 I had met at all. My blood ran cold, and when I saw a group of police officers walk in, the feeling got even stronger. They had cameras and were taking pictures all around the apartment. One older officer with gray hair came up to me and patted my shoulder. Only after I got to the police station did I learn that, in this building, I was the only person who had survived her knife. She was not a resident of 302 at all. She was the girl I had met earlier when I went downstairs to shovel snow. The girl from that couple. She and her boyfriend had no supplies at all. They had originally been staying in 202 of this building. The owner of 302 took pity on them and invited them to stay at her place. But no one expected the snow to keep getting heavier. Supplies were already scarce, and the two of them still were not satisfied. Their conflicts with the original owner kept getting worse. In the end, they lost control. The first time may really have been an accident. But later, when they impersonated the original owner and became floor captain, it was planned. After the two of them used up all of 302's supplies, they started searching for more supplies floor by floor, starting from the 4th floor. The girl had wanted to stop, but then the power went out. Most of what they had taken was food and water. Down jackets and blankets could not hold up against the cold of 50 below. So she set her sights on us. Her 9th floor really was the hardest one to handle. In fact, her original plan only targeted the family in 903, because she had planned to pin everything on you. The officer looked at me with sympathy and said, I was stunned as I listened to the officer continue. She originally wanted you to cut her a few times. I immediately remembered her screams after I threw the chili powder. Had it really hit her, or had she been giving me a chance to fight back? If my knife had not suddenly fallen, between her, badly wounded, and me, sitting on a pile of supplies, who would have looked more suspicious? The officer handed me a cup of hot water. Do not need to worry too much. She was so deranged that she even took the victim's clothes, and she impersonated the original owner of 302. The evidence is very solid. But thankfully, you did not fight her. Otherwise, you might be dealing with legal proceedings over self-defense right now. I swallowed a mouthful of hot water, driving the chill from my body. Before I left, I asked the police for a favor. He was a little surprised by my request, but he still gave me what I wanted. I took the old lady's sweater to a cemetery on the outskirts of City B. In the photo on her headstone, she was still smiling warmly, buried beside her husband. There was a bouquet of flowers in front of her grave that had just been delivered. I placed her beloved magnolia sweater in front of the grave. Then I bowed to her. Somehow, she had been watching over me all along, keeping me from harm. I wiped the tears from my face and bowed deeply to her once more. Then I strode forward into the light.